we are pleased to have Sarah Olivieri here with us. Sarah is the founder of Pivot Ground. She is a nonprofit business strategist, a #1 international best-selling author, and a former executive director. She has been featured on over 30 podcasts and is the creator of the Impact Method, which is a framework that helps nonprofits simplify their operations, build aligned teams, and make a bigger impact without getting overwhelmed or burning out. So today her session is titled How to Reset Your Strategic Goals for the New Normal. Thank you so much for joining us today, Sarah. We are super happy to have you here with us. I'll let you take it from here.
Sure. Hi, everybody. Give me a moment to share my screen. And here we go. All right. And so as mentioned, I'm Sarah Olivieri. I'm in New York State, for any of you who are wondering. Please take a moment to make sure you know where the chat is, because I'm going to ask you a few questions during this presentation, and I would love to see your answers in chat. Today, I've titled this talk, Pivot to Thrive, How to Reset Your Strategic Goals for the New, and I want it to be the new wonderful instead of the new normal. And I'm going to tell you all about why I am calling it the new wonderful. I want to show you today a bit about how you can really maximize your impact in this new wonderful, reduce overwhelm and burnout, make the new normal the new wonderful, and kind of bypass a whole bunch of things that may have plagued your organization in the past, as well as how to deal with some of the things that are going on right now. So let me somehow, normally I can change slides with a click of a button, but not today, so I'm going to have to click manually. This is me. You already met me. I'm Sarah Olivieri. If you're an executive director, I have definitely been in your shoes. I've been a program director. I've worked both at a foundation as well as human service nonprofits. So that's a bit where I am. And I would love for you to just pop in the chat quickly. What is your role at your nonprofit? What's your role? Are you an ED? Are you a fundraiser? Are you a program director? Are you everything? Board chair? Awesome. ED? Fantastic. So keep putting that, what you are, in the chat. I am watching while I'm talking, and I want to know so that I can highlight the things that are for you as I talk. Awesome. Executive director, financial analyst, awesome. Founder, president. Yay, we've got so many great people here doing wonderful things. I want to just check in. What are you facing right now? And these are some of the things that I've seen, and I want you to tell me, are these things you're seeing, or is there something to add to this list? So just take a moment to reflect and let me know in the chat. For many people, things have been thrown into chaos, and you're kind of maybe waiting for it to return to normal or wondering what you should do. You're just kind of in this moment of pause. If that's you, put a 1 in the chat. For other people, and this may be you as well, your income and expenses have shifted. You might be getting income sources from places you didn't expect. You might have had income suddenly dropping off. You might have had to spend in some places you were not planning to. I don't think anybody planned on buying masks for everybody unless you were already in the medical field. Or maybe you aren't spending in areas that you thought you'd be spending on. So if this is you, put a 2. Awesome. We got people jumping ahead. I love you jumping ahead, peoples. Put a 2 if that's you as well. Yep, I see it's definitely 2 for people. Planning for the future in increments 6 months and 6 months post. Another thing is where and how your work has changed. For a lot of nonprofits I've spoken to, they're in often two categories. One is their work has changed because they've shifted suddenly to a remote work environment. And for other people, their previously non-hazardous work environments suddenly became hazardous work environments. So put a 3 if your work environment has shifted. Yeah, we've got some 3s. A lot of people are dealing with that. And here's the big one, 4, right? Your old problems are still with you. You're still struggling with things like not having enough money or resources. Maybe there are issues with your board of directors and the relationship between the leader and the organization. Yeah, 4s. I'm seeing some 4s. Your strategy, if you have one, is more of a destination than really a plan or a roadmap how to get there. This is so true. And I think that a lot of these top ones are caused by the pandemic, but they are blips compared to the challenges that were with you already. And then having to deal with them on top of everything else can feel catastrophic. Excellent. Okay. So I want you to take a moment now because we're in a really special moment. As hard as COVID has been, it has churned the waters, right? So before, if you wanted to change, you had to be the change agent yourself. If you wanted to really think about a bold new vision for your nonprofit. But because we've experienced this pandemic, everybody has experienced, the whole world wide has experienced this. The pandemic has done the work of being the change agent for you. It has stirred the waters, and you now have an opportunity. You can get sucked into that whirlpool and sucked down and just wait to be spit out the other side, or you can take this moment right now to latch on to that change momentum and make the changes that you want so that you can experience the new wonderful instead of the new normal. So I'm going to give you some tools today on how to make sure you make that change into the new wonderful. But first I want to know, what would wonderful look like for you and your organization? Put it in the chat, write it in your notebook, just take a moment to get in touch with that. Is it that you only work 4 days a week and you're serving twice as many people? Is it that you have created a new way to solve the problem your organization solves that works way better than the old way? Have you completely changed the way you work? Have you gone from a local organization to a national organization? What are some of the ways? So fully engaged with the community and how they know about us and appreciate us. That sounds like a great, bold vision. Innovation to serve more people, reach more people, perhaps virtually. I think that's huge, especially in human services. So many people already struggled with transportation to get to services. We've made a huge opportunity for all of us to change to virtual services to serve those people. A refocus on our programming, a slowdown of activities, a chance to get caught up, absolutely. Pivoting to relevant virtual programming. That has become so clear, and there's the path for that. That's actually something I've been working on with organizations for years now, but it's been so hard because it's not the norm. Well, all of a sudden, doing things virtually has been forced into being the norm, and you can leverage that as an organization. Excellent. Keep putting them in because I'm going to review these after, even if I haven't read yours after long. So out loud, if I haven't read yours out loud, put them in the chat still. And we're going to come back to these later in this talk. So because we're going to do an activity, something very specific, I'm going to ask you to come back to a bold new vision. And I'll tell you, even if you're not sure what it is now, just try putting a few things out there. One of the hardest exercises I see for nonprofit leaders is to actually imagine beyond their day-to-day into what their organization would look like in a bold, wonderful new world. So I'm going to tell you a couple stories to kind of put how we make this change right now into context. And then I'm going to get into a really nitty-gritty exercise of exactly one thing you can start doing immediately after this training to do that. You could schedule it for next week too. That's fine. It's going to work again and again. So we're going to have some high-level stuff, and then we're going to get into some real specifics, and you're going to go home with the templates I'm going to show you. They're going to get sent to you in that email so that you can use them. So part of the problem, I said, is our old problems are still with us. And I used to always say to myself when I was running a nonprofit, and it's partly where I got the name Pivot Ground from, that's the name of my company, is we can't get there from here. Oftentimes where we want to go, there is no B line. It's not point A to point B. We have to maneuver to some other place that the destination we're trying to get to is available from. And so we're carrying around our old problems and this baggage. And I want to demystify what this rock here is for you a little bit. And I encourage you to watch this TED Talk from Dan Pelota, but I'll just give you a quick summary now if you haven't seen it. If you've seen it, I'd love to know. Put a yes in the chat. And basically what his whole talk is about is really to teach this one thing. Mel has seen it. Awesome. We've got a few people who've seen it. That the things we've been taught to think about giving and about charity and about the nonprofit sector are actually undermining the causes we love. That's you. And our profound yearning to change the world. And that's really sad. But most of those things that he's talking about are cultural norms, and they're norms that we have accepted within our own nonprofit cultures, but they are not the law, and you are not required to follow them. So I want to talk a little bit about the effect of changing your approach. So I told you I'd tell you two stories. The first story is about my own childhood. This is not me. This is not my actual family, but this is what it kind of looked like as a kid. We'd get in the car, and I was an only child. My mom would sit in the front, and my dad would sit in the driver's seat, and I would sit in the back where the kids are supposed to sit. Now, my dad had had a difficult childhood growing up. And we'd get in the car, and almost every time, who knows what it actually was. I have no memory of what would cause this, but he would end up screaming and angry, and it would always turn into some kind of fight, although I can't even call it a fight because it would just be rage coming out of my father. And this was really, this was disturbing as a kid. But years later, I just started to notice that, as I grew up and could I analyze what was going on a little more, that if my mom drove, which was rare but happened sometimes, the chances of my dad getting really upset went way down. And as I got old enough to drive myself, once I started driving, actually my mom would often sit in the front, and my dad loved to sit in the back and pretend he was being chauffeured around by his daughter, who he had taught how to drive. And not once did my dad get upset in that situation. And what I realized as I became a teenager was that when we drove with him driving and my mom in the front and me in the back, we brought the baggage of his entire childhood with us into the car. And if we physically, literally just changed our approach by changing what seat we were sitting in, we didn't have that problem. And we didn't need to solve the problems of his childhood to fix the problem of the car. We just needed to not bring those problems into the car with us. And that is the power of changing your approach. I have another story about changing approach because I want you, if nothing else, even I'm going to teach you some fantastic goal setting framework that you're going to be able to use right away. But the most important thing I can give you is to be brave enough to feel the power of changing your approach, because I want you to thrive. I want you to be able to make an even bigger impact coming out of this pandemic. And I want you to have more free time, be less overwhelmed, have the energy you need, not be burned out. And I know that you can't do that. I can't help you do that if you bring the baggage with you, but it's scary to let go of the nonprofit baggage. So I want to tell you another story to show you how possible it is. So I'm a sailor. I race sailboats. I love boats. And the thing I love sailing for the same reason I love working with nonprofits, because it's super complex and dynamic. And every nonprofit I know has a ton of dynamic things going on. And sailing is the same way. It's physics, hydrodynamics, aerodynamics, the weather patterns, technical, mechanical stuff. And if you're racing, you've got a team and team dynamics and a whole fleet of other teams and their dynamics to deal with as well. It's about as complex as it gets, just like nonprofits. So here's the thing about boats. This is a modern America's Cup racing sailboat, and they are incredible. But I'll tell you something. Is there any sailors in here? Give me a hi. The thing about a boat or anything moving through the water, yay, we have some sailors, is an object moving through the water actually is making a hole in the water. And on either side of that hole is a mountain. It's actually a wave of water. And the faster the thing goes, the bigger the mountain gets. So the faster the thing goes, it slows down, and it has a maximum speed because it's just the mountain's getting bigger and bigger and bigger. But if you change the design of the boat, you can ride up over the mountain and go as fast as you want. Now, this is easy to achieve if you have a motor and you're a super power boat, that's fine. But sailboats are amazing because they're harnessing the wind. And when they started, this is a group of people, sailors and boat designers, who they went way out of the box to start trying to make boats as fast as they could. And in fact, America's Cup, which is one of the most famous sailboat races in the world, they used to have a rule that said your boat had to meet these very specific parameters, and very few advances were made from like the 1950s into about the 80s. And then one year they changed the rules. In fact, they threw out the rules pretty much. They said your boat can be whatever you can build. And from that point, the technology behind sailboat racing blew out of the water, and they started making these boats. They had 2 hulls. They had 3 hulls. The hull is this long part that goes in the water. But look at this boat. It's flying out of the water. And these sails, they're rigid. They're not those, big fabric things. And these boats can go up to 50 miles an hour. They can go 2, 3, I think some of them can even go 4 times as fast as the wind. It's mind-blowing. So, this is some of my sailor excitement, but this is to show you, if you're willing to try a different approach, the results can be absolutely many times over what you ever imagined they could be. Sailors are not the only people who have really thought about how to change their approach. There's some fantastic business thinkers and leadership thinkers who've also really thought about how to change your approach. And what I'm going to tell you in this next section really builds on the work of some of these incredible thinkers. I know in the nonprofit space, a lot of people are familiar with Brené Brown. Dare to Lead is one of her books. If you haven't read any, I'd recommend you read that one. Some other fantastic thinking, Objectives and Key Results. Companies like Intel and Google move leaps ahead of their competition using this kind of thinking. Lesser known, but still really relevant, Jobs to be Done theory. The Great Game of Business, Jack Stack, who really pioneered open book management, and he did this with blue-collar workers in factories and blew his competition out of the water. Talk about 100xing a business's ability to do something. Unfortunately, there really hasn't been any of this thinking geared specifically to nonprofits. And that's what I have spent the last few years doing, is saying, how can we take this knowledge and apply it specifically to nonprofits? I see we have a nonviolent communication follower. I love nonviolent communication. Also a total game changer, absolutely, in how we approach things. So now I'm going to teach you a specific new approach, right? So we're going to wrap up with really how you're going to set goals in order to have a leveraged version of this approach. And you're going to hear me using words. I use words that I don't typically hear other people in the nonprofit space using, but please use them. I want you to think about efficiency. I want you to think about optimizing. I want you to think about leverage, because we're making an impact here. And I believe that nonprofits are more important than for-profit businesses. And the work you do is more important. And so you have to run not as good, but even better than for your for-profit equivalents, because you're more important. At least I think so, and I give that to you. So there are 3 things we need to do, right? So you might be thinking, you might have come here thinking, okay, we need to redo our strategy because things are moving fast here. And the problem is the approach of traditional strategic planning doesn't work. So you need a whole new approach. And the approach actually includes 3 pieces that you need working together. And to help you remember them, I've come up with an acronym, PAM, for anybody who knows the celebrity chef Emeril. He always says BAM when he cooks something. So PAM is how we're going to get a fantastic result by combining these 3 things. And I'm going to go into each one quickly for you so that you can recognize it. And then I'm going to teach you how to optimize, especially your actionable strategy, right today, now, in a moment. Any questions so far? I will take a moment to answer questions. You can put them in the Q&A, or you can put them in any time, and I'll circle around at the end. If you have a quick question in chat, I'll keep an eye out for that. So the first P of the PAM, the P in PAM is a process for improvement. You could call it a change process, but you always need to have a process of improvement in place. This can't be like a one-time thing. Oh, we occasionally improve, or we think about improving every 3 years or every 5 years. The world was already, because of the internet, moving too fast to not have a continuous process of improvement. However, now with the changes coming about from COVID, it's even faster. So here I've given you some like what a good process of improvement looks like, and some signs of a bad process of improvement or a process of disimprovement. I'll start with the bad. If your meetings are really unfocused, you're definitely not improving. Not considering data at all, only considering quantitative data, that's numbers, and not considering, you know, the stories and things that are going on. Addressing issues reactively. You always see issues as problems, and you might be over-relying on your board. If you're relying on your board for everything, you're probably missing a real process for improvement. Here are some of the pieces that make up a good process of improvement. You want to have planned periodic review. You need to have it consistently. Assume you're going to need to improve. Do not wait for there to be a problem to say, let's fix this. I know of no organization, no business, and no person who I can't tell you, you're going to run into issues for sure. 100% guarantee it's going to happen at some point in the near future. You need to value vulnerability, because it's in vulnerability that we identify the potential issues that are coming our way. And when we see things early, we act proactively instead of reactively. And when we act proactively, issues can become opportunities instead of turning into problems. And you need some sort of mechanism to change, right? It needs to be clear how you decide who, what, where, when, and why a change is initiated. So this is high level in a nutshell. I know I'm going fast because I want to teach you about setting goals so that you have that in your toolbox to set some new goals without having to go through a long extended strategic planning process or hiring a consultant. You can pivot your organization tomorrow if you want. The next thing in PAM is having an actionable strategy. We'll do the good, and then we'll do the, kind of not so actionable strategy. Outcomes are separated from your actions. I'm going to go into this in more detail in goal setting, so I'm not going to go into that right now. Every action needs to be tied to a strategic goal. If you're just doing things for the sake of doing them, or because you always did them that way, that is not going to get you there, and you should stop doing those things and save your time and energy for the things that are actually moving you forward. It should be prioritized, so when something comes up, you know how to keep the essential things and drop the less essential things for a later time on a dime. My clients who are using the impact method, when the pandemic hit, they knew exactly what to do, and they knew exactly how and what to shift on their plates, and it took them roughly 30 minutes to an hour to adapt to what was going on. It should include experiments. At our nonprofits, I haven't met a nonprofit yet who doesn't have a mission impossible. We are solving the world's most complex problems. You can't solve a complex problem without experimenting and innovating about how to solve that. And this is something, talk about baggage. That nonprofit world that Dan Piloto is talking about is filled with this. We're not going to take risks. We're not going to experiment. We're only going to do what we're sure is going to work. You can't solve a never solved, extremely complex problem with that approach. It's just not going to work. So let's not bring that baggage with us. It needs to address capacity and impact. I can't stand it when nonprofits come to me and say, we have a strategic plan, but we have to do X, Y, and Z, or raise, $30,000 before we can start doing our plan. You have to have a strategy that you can start today, that you can start tomorrow, that takes you. It's actually your navigation system. It's not just your destination. It has to take you from today through tomorrow and into the future. And at the end of the day, it has to be built on a foundation of love for your people, the people you serve, the people you work with, a love for all the people who are in your base, in your community. And the third piece in PAM is your modus operandi. Your modus operandi is how you conduct yourself in this world. If your organization were a person, who would they be? What would they be about? How would they approach situations? This is the how you move through the world, not just what programs you deliver, but what is your approach to solving problems, your approach to interacting with people. It needs to be outcome driven. You need distributed leadership so that you can leverage, right? Here's that word again, leverage. You want to leverage all of the brains in your organization. Nonprofits have more people in them per dollar than for-profits have in them. And so your greatest asset right now, and it costs you no money to leverage it, is the brain power, and you need to tap into all that brain power. So you need to distribute some decision making and leadership throughout your organization so you can leverage that brain power. A great MO is self-aware, and you've accounted for your own self. And it has a clear sense of self that with a fully aligned team. Some examples of not of a bad MO, if you are based on a machine learning, a machine model of leadership, if you have a real strong hierarchy and all the decisions are having to go through one or two people, that is extremely ineffective, it's inefficient, and you're not going to get there very well like that. Shared leadership is the opposite end of that spectrum. If you're trying to make joint decisions throughout the entire organization, if you have too many committees, you have a shared leadership problem. So you want to be not in a hierarchical system and not in a shared system. You want to have a distributed leadership system which has checks and balances. If you're not sure what that looks like, you're welcome to reach out to me. I'd be happy to tell you a little more about it. And we have a specific model for doing that in the impact method to make it easy to make that shift. if you're branding without a brand, you're having marketing campaigns and you don't really know who you are inside, you are probably wasting a lot of money and your efforts are probably not working very well. This might affect your fundraising. It might affect your volunteer base. It might affect your ability to get staff. All of these things are affected with that. And if you're task driven, this is the way we've always done it, then you have an MO problem. So that's the PAM approach. And the trick with the PAM approach is that when you do it all together, when you focus on all three things, you get a synergistic effect. The outcome is greater than the energy that you put in. Now, if you really want to thrive, you need to take this PAM approach, which is already going to be several times better than probably what you've done in the past. But you need to optimize each piece so that it's simple and easy and not overwhelming to implement. We're talking big results, but with not a ton of effort going in. We just want to put our effort in the right place. So the whole idea of optimizing PAM is what I put into the impact method, and it's way too much to teach you about right here and now. But what I can teach you is one specific piece of the impact method, which is how we set goals, which is an optimized way of setting goals. It's an optimized way of beginning that actionable strategy. So there's two things you need to know about optimizing. So you don't have to use the impact method. This is not an ad for the impact method. If you want to go and optimize yourself, there's these two things you have to know, and there's two more things. So there are four things, that's not four things in total. You need to increase positive leverage. So you're going to think about this, because in a moment we're going to be setting goals. Today we're going to be setting some goals, and you need to be thinking about what goals can you set and how can you achieve those goals in a way that implements positive leverage. You want to make changes that have a really high upside with little to no downside. And then you want to reduce drag. We talk about this in sailboat racing all the time, reducing drag. You want to get rid of things that have high costs with little to no upside. One of my favorite examples of drag is if you have a bad fit employee. That is one of the worst kinds of drags you could possibly have. And we have that every business has that problem, but especially nonprofits, because we're heart-driven people. And the idea of letting somebody go really goes against often what we feel. But it's not good for them, and it's not good for us. And when I hear nonprofits worried about money issues, this is one of the best ways to reduce drag. Is to think about your people. Now, that was how you optimize two things. And then the other two things you need to think about is where to optimize. So there's two places. You want to optimize your structures and processes. And I'm going to give you an optimized goal setting process today. But the other pieces in all parts of PAM, you want to optimize your structures and processes. And you do that by saying, how can we make this more simple? How can we leverage synergy to make it have a bigger result without putting more work in? And the other thing we need to optimize is relationships, because as much as we're fueled by money, we're really fueled by people and relationships with people. That's how people connect, through relationships. It's how you connect with your donors, right? We build relationships. It's how we build a stronger team, through relationships. And the way you optimize relationships is by leveraging trust. And I have an amazing thing to show you at the very end about how to do this in a leveraged way without having to do a ton of extra work yourself. But first, let's talk about structures and processes, because this is how PAM leverages synergy, right? Our processes for improvement, the better we get at that, the more we have an understanding of our MO, the clearer our MO, the better we're able to execute on our actionable strategy, and so forth. So each thing here benefits the other two. And that's the synergy that I'm talking about. I'm not going to go deep here today because we don't have enough time for that, but I just wanted you to see some of that synergy. So one of probably the very best way to start leveraging a process is through focus. That's step one. It all begins with focusing. When we focus, we start getting that simplicity and we can find that synergy. So let's talk about goals. What does focus look like when it comes to setting goals? Whoops, skipped one. So let's set some goals for a new wonderful. Now I want you to go back and think about your vision. What is your new wonderful vision? Just think about that for a moment. And I'll tell you, I've set some pretty big visions myself, some big goals out there. You might know them by the name BHAGs, big, hairy, audacious goals. I know lots of people use that. That's not my favorite term. But now, how do we create actionable goals that get us there? And I'll tell you, I used to be the worst at setting goals, and people taught me about SMART goals, and they didn't make any sense to me. I mean, they made a little sense, but my goals were always bigger, and I was already working with nonprofits. We don't have measurable missions often. How do we measure making somebody happier? It's really tricky, making people feel more fulfilled, improving their quality of life. We can measure certain things around this, but it's just not measurable. Modus operandi. Thank you very much. I am not a great speller, especially when I write my own stuff, but I will fix that. I do appreciate that. So let's talk about how we can set better goals. Here's what I learned. So typical me, most of you don't know me, but when something isn't working, I'm like a bloodhound. I'm like, we got to make this work. I've got to figure out how to make it really great and simple and leveraged. And here's what the big aha moment was, is that there are really two types of goals, and you need to separate them out for each other. Once you hear it, it's going to sound obvious, but a lot of people aren't talking about this. And they are outcomes, your outcome goals, and what the academics call process goals, but I call them execution goals because I kept forgetting what process goals meant, and I needed a word that was clearer to me. But an execution goal or a process goal, if you already know that term, is something that you're in control of. It's the set of actions that you can execute on. That's one type of goal. So for example, make 50 phone calls. I can make 50 phone calls. No one can stop me. I actually have my phone here. I can just start calling. But I can't just will 50 conversations. That's an outcome because there's another person involved with free will and all the complexities of the world. That's an outcome. And so as soon as we separate out, wow, we'd like to have 50 conversations, and we know that our best tool for doing that is phone calls. How many phone calls do we need to make in order to have 50 conversations? Probably it's more like 100 phone calls for 50 conversations. It really depends what you're doing. So that's the first thing I want you to know, is that the first secret of setting better goals and the kinds of goals that you can build your organization's strategy on without surveying the whole community. You can do this through having a better process of goal setting rather than a broader approach of getting input. So outcome goals and execution goals. Now, outcome goals, I actually break them into two categories. And this was new for me because these categories give you a clue as to what types of execution goals you're going to do. So a perception goal is when you want to change the way somebody thinks or feels. And an impact goal is when you want to change the way somebody acts or their state of being. So for example, an impact goal would be make a homeless person not homeless anymore. That's changing their state of being. Or get somebody who's suffering from a mental health issue to seek support. Or maybe a great one would be someone who's struggling with addiction issues to actually be willing to get help. When they go get help, that's the action, that's the impact. The perception goals are thinking and feeling. So if you're an organization that's very much about advocacy and raising awareness, you're often living in the world of changing perception. And then oftentimes too, you need to change the way somebody thinks before you can change the way they act. So what happens when we do this is when we have perception goals in place, there are a few disciplines that specialize in perception goal achievement. Marketing and branding, those are the primary business avenues that do this. So if you're pursuing a perception goal, you need skill sets related to marketing and branding. Two other areas that specialize in this, but typically aren't involved as much in the way we run our organizations, are the arts, performing arts, comedians, visual arts, the written arts, music. Art is very much about influencing the way people think and feel. And therapy, right? Therapists are all about helping us change the way we think and feel about ourselves and our lives. So you can certainly draw on those disciplines as well. So when we do this, now you can see that we can make a chain. We can have an impact goal. And in fact, your mission is probably an impact goal, although it might be a perception goal. So I'd like you to think about your organization's mission for a moment and then just pop into chat. Is your mission an impact goal or a perception goal? Is your organization's mission, just you can put an I for impact and a P for perception. You don't have to write it all out. Impact goal, great. Perception, both, okay. Impact, perception. Okay, keep putting them in. So what happens here is we get our strategies look like a chain. Our mission's at the middle. We have some outcome goals stemming out. And from those outcomes, we have our execution goals. Now, we might even have a chain, right? So it might be an impact goal, and we have the next level out as the execution goal, or we might have an impact goal, which has a perception goal that has to be achieved first, and then the execution goal. So we do the execution goal, and hopefully we get the perception goal achieved, which causes the impact to be achieved, or sometimes we have an execution goal that has a direct result on the impact. So common one, simplified example, but if we want people to show up at our meeting, we provide free food. Execution goal, provide free food. Impact goal, get people to show up at the meeting. Fantastic. So how can we take this goal setting a step farther? Now, I'm going to show you a template for setting an impact or perception goal here, and I have one for an execution goal. And we're going to give you these templates and a workbook about how to use them and how to actually lay them out into a new strategy, which I just described, but it's in the workbook as well. So all you need to do here, you're going to follow the process. Fill in every box. Yes, we'll be sharing the slides as well. So you're going to state the goal. Now, I warn you that people get better at setting goals over time, and it's often the case, right? We need this process of improvement because we think a goal is clear and awesome on one day, and then a couple months later we come back and we're like, what were we thinking? That's not clear at all. This is the reality of goal setting and goal achieving. So it's really important that you have a process of improvement where you're coming back and looking at your goals regularly. I'll tell you, in the impact method, we are looking at our outcome goals every 60 days. So that's the kind of frequency I want you to be thinking about. You could do it quarterly, but I'll tell you from my own experience, 60 days is even better. State the goal. Here, just indicate, is it an impact goal or a perception goal? Because that's going to clue you in as to what you're going to do to achieve this goal. What order? What's the hierarchy, the order of this? Is it something you're going to do right away? Is it a do next? Or is it build capacity to do? Yes, the description of what an impact goal and what a perception goal and the process of linking them together is all in the workbook I'm going to send you. So do not worry about frantically taking down notes. It's in there with step-by-step instructions. So the order is important here, right? We don't need to say 1 year, 2 year, 3 year. Goals have their own natural timelines. What we need to know is this a goal we're able to work on now? That's a do first goal. Is this a goal that we could do now, but will work even better if we do it next? And or is this a goal that we can't actually start working on now? We don't have the capacity to do it. And if we don't have the capacity to do it now, we want to make sure that some of our do first and do next goals bring us the capacity to do a do next goal. Then, right, everything prioritized. If you had your goals prioritized already before COVID, you knew exactly what to drop for a bit while you dealt with new things. So I like to use this scale: critical, important, normal, and low. If you mark something as low, just crumple it up, throw it away, delete it, whatever you need to do. We're nonprofits. We're solving the world's most complex problems. We don't do low priority goals. So we're in the normal, important, and critical realm. Any notes to help clarify the goal? What were you thinking about? Some initial ideas about what you're going to do to achieve this goal. The more you put here, the more you'll understand what you were thinking about when you come back in a couple months and review this goal and say, what were we thinking about? You'll have some notes here to also help make sure that everybody who reads this goal understands it. How will you define success? What does success looks like? For those of you who've used SMART goals, this is the measurable piece. And that's where you can put something about knowing when you've achieved this goal. And in nonprofits, that can be tricky. And that's just the nature of our missions. And then who's accountable? Someone should own the goal. Someone should be the ones beating the drum to say, we're moving forward on this goal, and keeping everybody who's involved with it, achieving it, moving in the direction of this actual goal here. Now, the next piece is execution goal, right? Similar process: state the goal, give it an order, give it a priority, add some notes, define success, or another way to say it that's helpful with execution goals is how will you define done? And then give it an owner. And then what you're going to write down is, what are the action sets? These are like to-do list titles. What are the big sets of activities you're going to do to achieve this action goal? So let's use just the simple example of, our impact goal was have people show up at our meeting. The execution goal was have food at the meeting. And the action sets are, evaluate and plan for a caterer, who's going to set up the room for the food on the day of, and a set of to-dos around cleanup afterwards, right? It's a simplified example, but I hope that kind of clarifies again, and there's be some examples of action sets in the workbook. So now you have your mission. You have a big outcome goal attached to it. You have 1 or maybe 2 or 3 execution goals that you're going to do to hopefully achieve that big outcome. And you're going to have a set of task lists that are going to achieve the execution goal, that will probably achieve the outcome, which will hopefully help you achieve your mission. And in that process, you have just built yourself a new strategic plan. Now, one note for those of you who are worried, but what about interviewing all of our constituents and we don't know what they want? If you have that problem, that you're not in touch with what people are looking for, then you have a marketing problem in your nonprofit, not a strategy problem. Because nonprofits tend to just use what's the term? Communications, right? We say communications, but marketing is more than just communications. Marketing includes research, and that research piece in good marketing is ongoing. So if you're not doing that research, then you're not fully completing a marketing skill, and it's not really a strategic goal problem. It's not a strategy problem. It's an MO problem. It's how you operate, and something is missing there. So I'd like you to take a moment to try it. You're going to get the workbook. You can try it at home, but this is your chance to try writing down an impact goal or an execution goal and its corresponding execution goal, and put it in the chat right now, and I'll tell you if you're on the right track. So if you want my feedback on it, this is your chance, but again, you will get the worksheet as well. I'll give you a moment if you want to type some things in. I'm going to keep talking, but as you put them in, I will give you that feedback. Now you're wondering, you know, oh my goodness, it's 1:50. How are we going to talk about optimizing relationships in all this time? Well, I told you I had a trick to show you. So remember that this goal setting process is a way to add focus to setting goals. And focus is the key to that, creating a focused process. Well, it just so turns out that focus is also the key to leveraging relationships by building trust. And we have one example here. Lynn goes for the win. Perception. We are the state's design museum. I want you to add a little more information on that, and I'll get to it in the Q&A. So focus, right? Focus was the key to leveraging, to creating optimized processes. And it's also the key to gaining trust. And it's really all you need to start with, is because when you start focusing, you get clarity about what's going on, what you need to do, where you need to put your attention. And when you have clarity, you gain perspective. And people who have perspective right now they have options about which way they're turning. They're thinking about which way to go. Because once you get perspective and you can see those options, you gain certainty. And I can tell you, the people right now who are out in the world with certainty, they are the heroes of this moment. And the thing about certainty is when you're certain, you gain trust. And so people trust you, and you can trust those people. So you don't have to do a whole bunch of things to leverage relationships. You just have to get yourself focused. It's the only thing you need to leave here today with, is to be brave enough to try something new and to get focused. Because when you have focus, clarity, perspective, certainty, and trust in all aspects of your organization, then you will thrive and you will not be overwhelmed or burned out. So it's not expensive to change. It's not even time consuming, and it's not complicated. You just have to do it. This is my real dad. That's me in the sunglasses, and that's my son. And my dad and I are teaching my son how to sail here. And partly, a big part of our relationship, we have a fantastic relationship now, is because we changed our approach of how we work together and how we come together. And it has made all the difference for us as a family, and it makes all the difference for the nonprofits that I work with, because they're willing to just change their approach, and their old problems just quickly, they don't come with them. So I'm going to answer some questions. Put them in the Q&A if you can. I'll still watch the chat, and Mel is going to help me as well. Keep an eye on the Q&A. So I have an example. Impact, go-to-org, presenting hybrid, career exploration programs. Perception, people are better equipped to successfully pursue the career path of their choice. I'm not sure I fully understand your impact goal, so if you want to clarify that. But I think perception, it sounds like that might be a fundraising perception you're thinking about, but if you want to clarify that, that would be great.
And while people are putting in their goals and their questions, Sarah, I'm just wondering if you're able to tell us where we can learn more about the impact method.
Sure. The impact method is really a set of these optimized processes within that PAM framework. And it is very easy to learn. If you'd like to learn more, you're welcome to go to pivotground.com, and you can hit the apply button and have a one-on-one call with me. But I have an online course you can go through yourself. You can do a hybrid model and take the course and do a year-long coaching with me. And I do work with clients one-on-one if your organization is larger or more complicated, or you'd like the one-on-one implementation with me. But it's typically 50% less to a tenth of the cost of traditional hiring strategic planners. So I don't want you to be scared of costs. It's so much less because it is a different approach. It just costs less as well. And it's easy to implement because it comes with its own change mechanism, its own process of improvement. And through 3 simple types of meetings and taking a certain amount of respite for yourself and your team, you can actually use that process to implement the entire method.
Awesome. Thank you. Did you see that question coming in from Lynn? She's saying, what is a good number of people to involve in goal setting?
So I think, I don't want to say exactly the more the merrier because it can be a little overwhelming. So groups of roughly 7 to 10 can manage setting goals. It kind of depends how used the group is already to working together. So if your leadership teams are not used to working together on goal setting, maybe keep it towards 7. The important thing is that you have people who really understand what's going on the ground in your organization. And so a big shift I encourage people to think about is, because traditional strategic planning is often board driven, and then the board kind of hopes they got it right and they seek input from everybody. I encourage you to take your executive director and the leaders within the organization who really know what's going on the day-to-day basis, and have those people get in a room and generate the goals. And then as a board, you can double check that those make sense. But you're going to probably get better goals that way. And you don't need to, have huge assessments or take a year to do it. And people who are totally new to the impact method usually have their first version of their strategy in a lengthy, slow, easy to manage onboarding process of 10 weeks. But it can you could set aside the time tomorrow and hash out an initial version of your strategy in about 5 hours if you needed to.
Awesome, thank you. It looks like Allison is clarifying their impact goal, saying we deliver experiential career exploration programs to children and youth. We want children and youth facing barriers to completing high school and going to post-secondary, connect their education to a future career by learning about and understanding what might be right for them.
Okay, so it sounds like that your mission is an impact goal. So you're getting children and youth to actually do something. So it's an impact goal, but you probably now need to think about what impact goals and what perception goals need to stem off that to kind of knock out a chunk, one step further towards your mission. Yes, you can absolutely have my contact information. You'll get it in an email, but I'll pop it into chat as well.
Perfect. I don't see any more questions coming in, and it looks like we're just coming up on 2 p.m. EST here. So Sarah, did you want to cover anything else before we sign off here?
I would just say thank you everybody for your time. If you do want to apply for a consultation call, I really encourage you to do that. It is really a consultation call, and we really address issues in that. we can usually get to the heart of at least one pretty significant issue in doing that. So I encourage you to go ahead and apply.
Awesome. And before we just sign off, I just wanted to remind everyone that our next session will be next Monday. So that will be June 1st at 9 a.m. PST or 12 p.m. EST. The session will be led by QuickBooks Made Easy, Greg Bosson, where he'll be presenting his session that's titled PPP Loans, Getting Loan Forgiveness, and QuickBooks Tracking. If you haven't already registered for that, we've actually just posted the link in the comment section to sign up. And lastly, I just wanted to remind everyone again that the session today will be recorded, so you'll be receiving that along with Sarah's slide deck with all her valuable information and resources by the end of this week. Thanks again, everyone, and we will see you next week. And thank you so much, Sarah. It has been such a pleasure to have you here, and it seems like everyone really, really enjoyed all of your information. So thank you so much.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you. Bye-bye.